Welcome to the debate. When you watch a master watchmaker at work, there is this incredible illusion of complete, undisturbed control. Tweezers in hand, they're placing a gear the size of a grain of sand into this incredibly complex mechanism. The human is the undisputed maestro, right? And the tools they use are entirely passive.
Right, yeah. The tools are simply physical extensions of their intent. I mean, the tweezers don't have an opinion on where that gear should go, they just hold it.
Exactly. But imagine if, one day as the watchmaker is moving their hand, the tweezers decide the gear should actually be placed, slightly to the left.
Oh, wow.
Just a tiny algorithmic correction for what the tool calculates as optimal efficiency.
At that exact moment, it is no longer just a tool, it becomes an active participant in the work.
Yes, and that is exactly the threshold we are standing on today in the modern workplace. We are looking at the moment the tool pushes back. So today we are diving into a fundamental question raised by some really compelling analyses of how artificial intelligence and robotics are fundamentally altering human-machine interactions.
It's a huge shift.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at the concept of the technological singularity. For those familiar with the literature, this is the hypothetical point where AI outpaces human intelligence and, entirely replaces human labor. Our central question today is this: is the singularity a dangerous apocalyptic myth, distracting us from reality? Or does it reflect an inevitable, creeping reality of how machines are actively usurping human agency?
It's a critical distinction to make, especially because it dictates how we actually design the systems we interact with every single day.
Right. And I argue that the singularity is in fact a dangerous myth. It's a narrative based almost entirely on imagination rather than empirical data or, frankly, software engineering realities. I believe we have to completely abandon this sci-fi narrative of impending human replacement.
Completely abandon it?
Completely. Because it blinds us to the actual work we need to be doing. If we are terrified of Terminators, we aren't focusing our resources on designing augmented intelligence. Technologies built specifically to empower humans rather than replace them.
Okay, well, while I concede that a true science fiction artificial general intelligence may be decades away or even impossible, I argue that the core threat represented by the singularity is already here.
Already here? How?
The threat is the transfer of decision-making power from humans to machines, and the resulting mechanization of workers. This is an inevitable, progressing reality. It's a trajectory we're already locked into. And treating the singularity merely as a myth means we are choosing to ignore the daily erosion of human agency at our own peril.
Let's lay out our foundations here, because definitions really matter in this space.
Definitely.
To understand why the singularity is a distraction, we have to look at the massive gulf between narrow artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Every single meaningful advancement we see today, whether we're talking about massive language models writing code, computer vision in cars, or robotic automation on an assembly line, is narrow AI.
Right, it's domain-specific.
Exactly. It's designed to efficiently solve a specific, mathematically defined problem. AGI, on the other hand, aims to reproduce broad, dynamic, human-like cognitive capabilities. But, as researchers constantly point out, AGI is in its absolute infancy. It relies on imagination, not trustworthy data.
But the public discourse doesn't separate the two, do they?
No, exactly. The public discourse, fueled largely by tech marketing, treats AGI as if it's arriving next Tuesday. And this creates a deeply flawed myth of full machine autonomy. True autonomy is basically impossible because intentions, by design, will always be defined by humans.
I see what you're saying, but
a machine doesn't just wake up and want to optimize a supply chain. Someone has to program the optimization metric. Therefore, these apocalyptic fears of complete human replacement are mathematically and engineeringly unfounded. They are a distraction from our true path forward, which should be leveraging human-machine complementarity.
Well, I don't disagree that current AI is technically narrow. You are right, the machine doesn't have a soul or biological desires. But I argue that clinging to that technicality misses the forest for the trees.
How so?
The trajectory toward the singularity is very real, and it is fundamentally altering how we work right now. You call it a myth, but many leading experts and developers actively sustain this myth. Why? Because it's grounded in the very real exponential scaling of data processing power. We do not need a conscious, fully autonomous AI to experience the consequences of the singularity.
But if it doesn't have intent, how is it taking over?
Because intent is outsourced to the algorithm. When narrow AI becomes powerful enough to dictate workplace protocols and exercise action selection over a human worker, it leads directly to worker mechanization and profound work alienation. The singularity isn't a sudden apocalyptic event where robots march down the street with laser rifles.
Right, thankfully.
It is the creeping, inevitable reality of machines slowly hollowing out human autonomy in the office and on the factory floor.
I think we need to move this from the theoretical realm of the singularity into the concrete reality of the economy, because this narrative of creeping doom directly feeds into the massive public panic around job replacement. We hear these terrifying statistics all the time.
Well, let's look at that panic, because I believe it is entirely rational. We can look back at that famous landmark Oxford study from a few years ago that sent shockwaves through the global economy.
The 47% paper.
Yes, it predicted that a staggering 47% of jobs in the United States were at high risk of disappearing entirely due to automation. And this isn't just academic modeling in an ivory tower, it is lived anxiety. Massive surveys across Europe around the same time showed that nearly 3/4 of the population believed robots and AI were actively stealing people's jobs.
72%, yeah.
Exactly. When nearly 75% of a population recognizes a threat and major economic models back them up, you cannot simply dismiss it as a myth. It is a highly rational response to rapid, observable automation.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. That 47% study is perhaps the most heavily cited and most profoundly misunderstood piece of economic modeling in this entire debate.
Misunderstood?
Completely. What those researchers did was look at technical capabilities. They essentially looked at a list of human professions, broke them down, and asked, which tasks could, in principle, be automated by a machine? But they made a massive categorical error that labor economists have been tearing apart ever since. They confused automating a task with automating an entire job.
But a job is fundamentally just a collection of tasks. If you automate enough of them, the job ceases to exist.
But jobs aren't just a list of independent tasks you can check off on a clipboard. The friction of the real world requires human intervention. Let me offer an analogy to explain how this modeling failed. Assuming a job is fully automated just because a few physical or repetitive tasks are removed is like assuming a master chef is obsolete just because someone invented the food processor.
Okay, but
Chopping onions is a task, pureeing tomatoes is a task, but designing a menu, tasting for flavor balance, managing a chaotic kitchen staff during a dinner rush, adapting when the supplier forgets to deliver the basil, that is the job.
okay, fair enough, but a chef is a highly creative role. What about mundane office work?
It applies there too. Think about a data entry clerk. Typing numbers into a spreadsheet is a task. But tracking down the vendor who sent the messy invoice, deciphering their terrible handwriting, and negotiating a deadline extension, that's the friction of the job. When later researchers reevaluated that exact same labor data, but actually accounted for the daily friction and the heterogeneity of tasks within complex jobs, the number of jobs at risk of full automation plummeted from 47% down to just 9%.
9% is still a massive systemic economic disruption. That is millions of people losing their livelihoods.
Yes, disruption happens, but it is not the permanent job apocalypse the singularity myth predicts. In fact, if you actually look at macro data from the European Commission regarding the last 20 years of automation, a completely counterintuitive picture emerges. The data shows that automation actually had a positive impact on overall manufacturing employment.
Wait, positive?
Yes, this is the automation paradox. Just like previous waves of industrialization, machines take over the physically demanding or heavily repetitive labor. This drives down the cost of production, which lowers prices, which increases consumer demand, and ultimately creates entirely new categories of work that are completely beyond the current capabilities of narrow AI.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are focusing entirely on the macroscopic head count. How many human bodies are still legally employed, standing on the factory floor or sitting in an ergonomic chair in the office?
Because employment matters.
It does, but I am not arguing that the human head count necessarily goes to zero. I am arguing about what those humans are actually doing all day and how they are being forced to do it. The food processor analogy is great, but modern AI isn't the food processor. It is the restaurant manager standing over the chef's shoulder, telling them exactly how many seconds they have to plate the dish.
Interesting shift.
Let's look at recent frameworks regarding human-machine interaction, specifically the concept of conjoined agency.
It is a brilliant framework for understanding the modern workplace, I agree.
It really is, and I think it perfectly illustrates my point. Conjoined agency basically means looking at a human and a machine as a single unit trying to accomplish a goal. The question is, who is actually pulling the strings?
Right.
This framework breaks work down into two core components. First, there is action selection, which is deciding what to do. Second, there is protocol development, which is deciding how to do it. The reason the singularity trajectory is a creeping reality is that machines are actively challenging the dominance of human agency by taking over both of those domains.
Give me a concrete example of how you see that playing out.
Let's use something everyone understands. Google Maps. When you get in your car, you exercise action selection. You decide, I want to go to the grocery store. Google Maps exercises protocol development. It tells you, take a left on Main Street, avoid the highway because of traffic. It decides how you achieve your goal.
That seems like a decent balance.
It is, but what happens when the technology shifts? What happens if Google Maps starts deciding which grocery store you go to because one brand paid for sponsored routing? Suddenly, the machine has stolen action selection.
And you see this happening in the workplace.
Everywhere. Think of a modern logistics warehouse worker. They are legally employed, so they count in your optimistic employment statistics. But an algorithmic management system tells them exactly which aisle to walk down, exactly which box to pick up, and exactly how many seconds they have to complete the route.
I see.
The machine has taken over both action selection and protocol development. The human has zero cognitive input. They're just a fleshy robot executing the machine's will, because it's cheaper than building a mechanical arm that can grip cardboard. That is the creeping singularity. It's the mechanization of the human soul.
I absolutely agree with the conjoined agency framework, but I think you are drawing the exact wrong conclusion from it. This taxonomy is precisely why we must stop obsessing over the myth of inevitable AI dominance and focus our energy on intentional design choices.
Intentional design?
Yes. The researchers who study this outline 4 distinct forms of conjoined agency. Technologies that assist, augment, arrest, or automate. What you just described in the warehouse is an arresting technology. The agency was intentionally transferred to the machine, arresting the human's autonomy. But there is a totally different path assisting and augmenting technologies, where action selection explicitly remains with the human.
But is it realistic to expect massive corporations to choose augmentation if arresting technologies are cheaper, faster, and give management total control over the floor?
That is the whole point of abandoning the singularity myth. As long as humans define the intentions, true autonomy of the machine is a fiction. The warehouse algorithm didn't spontaneously decide to optimize for speed at the expense of human joints.
Well, no.
A human logistics manager programmed it to do that, to hit a quarterly target. If we recognize that this is a human choice, not an inevitable robot uprising, we can regulate it. We can design differently. We can demand augmented intelligence, where the human uses the AI to make better, faster decisions, rather than the AI using the human to simply move boxes.
But you're assuming a level of human choice in the face of market capitalism that historically just hasn't existed. You treat arresting technologies as a mere design flaw that we can just politely ask software engineers to stop making.
Not politely ask. Demand through policy and market forces.
I argue it is the inevitable endpoint of efficiency. When technology gains the data processing power to dictate action selection better and faster than a human, the market will dictate that the machine takes over. And when it does, it results in profound work alienation. The worker is de-skilled. They lose the cognitive engagement of deciding how to do their job. You call it a choice. I call it the fundamental gravity of technological advancement under our current economic paradigm.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because treating this mechanization as an uncontrollable, inevitable law of gravity is exactly the trap of the apocalyptic AI myth. There is a deeply ingrained, almost religious fatalism in how we talk about artificial intelligence. We treat it like an incoming asteroid.
Because the sheer scale of venture capital behind it makes it feel like an asteroid. It feels unstoppable to the average worker.
But it's not an asteroid, it's a software product. There's fascinating psychological research into the concept of human self-deification among tech creators that is incredibly relevant here.
Self-deification?
Yeah, why do the creators of AI often sustain and promote this apocalyptic singularity myth? Why do CEOs go on media tours warning that their own products might destroy the world? Because it elevates them.
Ah, it makes them look like they hold the keys to the universe.
Exactly. If AI is a quasi-divine, inevitable force of evolution, then the engineers building it are practically gods giving birth to the next stage of life on Earth. It's an incredibly seductive, ego-driven narrative. But more importantly, and more dangerously, it entirely absolves them of responsibility for the mundane, highly controllable labor conditions they're creating right now.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right? If human mechanization is an inevitable law of gravity, then you can't sue a tech company for de-skilling workers or causing repetitive stress injuries. By calling the singularity inevitable, we surrender before the fight even begins. We give the designers a free pass.
Right.
We have to actively shift the research agenda. We have to demand human empowerment as a non-negotiable design constraint. We have to say, you built this algorithm, you can build it differently.
The psychological analysis of self-deification is fascinating, and I completely agree that tech CEOs love to view themselves as modern Prometheans, gifting fire to mortals. But discarding their grand mythology doesn't neutralize the technology they are actually building.
It doesn't neutralize it, but it reframes it.
Even if we strip away the religious language of this singularity, the operational reality of the math remains. Let's talk about cognitive bandwidth, especially in white-collar work.
Okay, let's look at the office environment.
If an algorithmic system can process 10,000 variables a second to determine the optimal trades for a financial portfolio, or scan millions of medical records to flag a tumor, a human simply cannot meaningfully exercise action selection in that loop. The math is too fast and too vast.
They exercise high-level selection.
No, the human becomes a rubber stamp. We see this in aviation with autopilot dependencies, we see it in algorithmic trading, and we are starting to see it in everyday office software that drafts our emails and schedules our lives. The machine's capacity totally outpaces human cognitive bandwidth. At that point, saying we are augmenting the human is just a polite legal fiction.
A legal fiction?
Yes, it's a way of keeping a human in the seat. So someone is legally liable if things go wrong, while the machine actually does the cognitive work. The human isn't augmented, they are a liability shield. That is why I maintain that the mechanization of the human mind is a progressing reality, not just a failure of imagination or a bad design choice. When the tool is 1,000,000 times faster than you, it becomes the master.
It is absolutely a profound challenge of cognitive bandwidth. I won't deny that. But that just means our interfaces need to fundamentally evolve. It means the AI must be designed specifically to summarize and translate those 10,000 variables into a format that actually enhances human judgment rather than bypassing it entirely.
But again, that assumes the primary goal of the corporation deploying the AI is human enhancement and empowerment, rather than pure, unadulterated output efficiency.
Which brings us precisely to the summary of our positions today, and why the framing of this debate is so vital. Discarding the singularity myth, stripping away the apocalyptic sci-fi fear of full human replacement, is an essential first step for our society. It clears the smoke from the room so we can focus on the real task at hand. And that task is the intentional, ethical design of artificial intelligence. If we accept that technology is a human product, We must rigorously prioritize augmenting and assisting technologies that keep action selection firmly in human hands. We can build AI that empowers the worker rather than alienating them. But human empowerment is not a historical accident. It is an active engineering and policy choice.
And my position remains that while a true conscious AGI might be a distant dream or a marketing gimmick, we cannot dismiss the singularity as a mere myth. The underlying trajectory, the creeping mechanization of the workforce via the systemic transfer of agency to machines, is an undeniable reality happening every time an algorithm tells a worker what to do and how fast to do it.
I hear that.
We have to confront this systemic erosion of human autonomy in the workplace head-on, rather than hoping good design intentions will somehow magically outcompete structural corporate incentives for efficiency and control.
I think where we fundamentally converge today is that the most critical challenge moving forward isn't whether sentient robots will suddenly wake up and build a dystopian society out of the ashes of humanity.
No, the battleground is much more subtle and honestly much more immediate than that.
Exactly. The battleground is over conjoined agency. It is about the quality, the dignity, and the power dynamics of the human-machine interaction today, right now, in the office and the warehouse.
I agree entirely. The real question of our era is who gets to decide the protocols of our daily labor. Is it us or is it the algorithm?
There is so much more to explore in this material, particularly in how we evaluate the subtle, microscopic differences between technologies that assist us and technologies that arrest our development. Looking past the sensational headlines about the end of the world allows us to examine this highly nuanced taxonomy of intentionality.
So, the next time you are sitting at work and a piece of software suggests a course of action, whether it's auto-completing a sentence or routing your delivery, ask yourself, is it handing you a tool to help you build, or is it trying to hold the tweezers for you?
A brilliant thought to leave on: are you the master watchmaker, or are you slowly becoming just another gear in the machine?